What is up? Good morning and welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot. We are finally done with dynasty drafts. I mentioned it last week. It is June. It is summertime. It is time to jump into redraft season. But I didn't want to take away all of the familiarity you guys had over the last few months. So we're going to do a redraft Superflex draft. That's going to change the draft order up quite a bit. And we were going to have two great guests, and then one of them had to cancel, and then I screwed up the scheduling for the other one. So you get me and Josh to start the show, and we'll have a special guest a little bit later on. Let's get into it. Imagine tuning into a show to hang out with the amazing Hutchinson Brown and then being told, guess what? Hutchinson Brown isn't going to be joining when I said he was going to because I don't pay attention to my own DMs. Welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot. I am Ryan Weisse, your host. No Austin Amendolia this week, but the founder of Cub Fantasy decided to jump in because he wanted to hang out with Hutch and Hutch's dad. And Josh, you get me. Good morning, my friend.
Yeah, you're going to do the show by yourself for the first half hour here shortly. You lying sack of shit.
So let me break down for everybody what happened is Hutch and his dad have very busy Saturdays. And so I reached out to them to have them both on the show. They happened to both be available this morning, but Hutch immediately said, 11 doesn't work for us. Can we push to 11:30? To which Ryan responds, of course I'll push to 11:30. For you, Hutch, anything. And then Ryan completely forgets and never makes a note of it anywhere. So we schedule this entire thing to go off at 11 o'clock. Hutch is going to join us a little bit later. His dad actually couldn't make the show at all. So it's going to be me, Josh, and Hutch. I did confirm Hutch is going to be able to do the draft. So we are going to get started. We are going to talk some fantasy football. And Hutch is going to join us later when it's time to talk about some of these players. I screwed up. My bad, y'all. But guess what? We're still going to have a ton of fun. Josh, we've made our jokes. But how are you this morning? Thanks for jumping on.
I'm good. Always tired Saturday mornings, late Friday nights working in a restaurant, but always fun to mock draft. And, really, this is kind of like pseudo prep for Scott Fishbowl, right? Redraft style, but with Superflex and maybe not necessarily all the crazy other intricate scorings that come with it, but it'll be fun. And it'll make for a very simple transition for us that have been doing a plethora of dynasty drafts lately, kind of help knock off the rust before we get into the harder redraft season.
Yeah, I think the big plus of filling this draft up was how close it was to Scott Fishbowl. So let's go ahead and get the draft up on the screen and talk about it a little bit. So I set up a 12-person draft because I knew Hutch would be the big draw. Bait and switch. We don't have Hutch, but you guys all filled the draft up. I appreciate it. But like I mentioned earlier to Josh, it's the appeal of Scott Fishbowl is why I think this draft filled up so quickly. So let's talk a little bit about this draft settings. So it's not quite Scott Fishbowl. He did drop official scoring yesterday. For those who are not aware, you can go and check that out. It's a little bit of what we expected from earlier in the week. He wasn't able to get the targets in, but that's not here nor there. Scott Fishbowl scoring is available, but there's obviously not going to be a perfect Scott Fishbowl mock draft. However, that is not the exact reason I decided to make this a Superflex redraft draft. That is because last week we had a question about, is there late round value for quarterbacks that we never got a chance to get to on the show? And I said, you know what? Let's kick the can a week and let's talk about that for next week. So we are going to do a Superflex redraft. I want to see what happens with these older quarterbacks now that we're not talking dynasty, because in Superflex they should be super valuable, but in dynasty they still fall because they're old. So again, this is going to be a little bit like Scott Fish, and it's going to be great practice for a Scott Fishbowl format, but we don't have all the other first down scoring and all that kind of stuff. And before we get started, let's talk about our drafters. Our buddy Gator Raiders is picking from the 101. Josh took the 102. Christian took the 103. Scooter Dutch at 4. HoovTube, our buddy, at 5. The Retro Coach at 6. Faith takes 7. Lewis Hall, my buddy who I met at Scott Fishbowl Live last year, at 8. Jay Kaplan, who is in the chat, at 9. Hutch is going to be picking from 10. Brocal at 11. And Duarte at 12. I'm going to start the draft because we've already kept everybody over while we were waiting to see why Hutch wasn't in the chat yet. And the reason Hutch wasn't in the chat is because he was never going to be in the chat because I screwed the timing up. Josh, I actually wanted to get started with a question that isn't necessarily about this draft. And before we dive in, I want to remind everybody, we are not going to grade every pick. We are not going to grade every team. At the end of the draft, Josh and Hutch are going to break down their teams and what their draft strategy was. We're not going the full 22 rounds of Scott Fishbowl. The show only lasts an hour, so I cut us off at 15 rounds. I also didn't do third round reversal because this isn't an actual Scott Fishbowl draft. But at the end of the draft, Josh and Hutch will recap their drafts. I will pick the oops of the draft if somebody screwed up. If you're here for us to rate your team, it's not happening. We're going to talk about draft strategy. We're going to talk about interesting trends. Josh, I wanted to start with an actual fantasy football question that I saw people debating again, and I kind of thought this debate was over. And that is FAAB versus just straight waiver order in fantasy football. Now, Scott Fishbowl runs with I think it's a $100 FAAB or $1,000 FAAB or whatever it is for the entire season. Waivers don't start running until September, like right before the league's about to start. But I saw people debating waiver order again recently. Josh, is FAAB just superior? Is that how you prefer all leagues to run?
I have leagues that do a combination of both. I have some that are just FAAB. I have some that are simply just waiver order. I think that the biggest thing is I feel like more people that are more entrenched in the industry that consume fantasy football content 365, 7 days a week, 12 months out of the year, they tend to lean more towards the idea of FAAB because it creates more of an even playing field, I guess. Like it's not about, who has the worst team and then they can load up on the best players or who ends up hitting the waiver wire quickest. But then you have we'll say the older guard, like the average player, right? There was no FAAB when this all first started, right? So many people are so averse to change that, they just stick with the old ways of doing it. I personally, I have dynasty leagues that don't have FAAB. I have a couple of them. One of them, both of them actually are single QB leagues, but I don't think it's the end of the world. I mean, if it's a dynasty league for starters, all the best players are already on rosters anyway. Like it doesn't, you're not, itching for the one breakout that's never going to happen again. Like it's, so I don't put too much stock into it, but I'm fine with either. So like the debate in and of itself is just kind of like, it falls on deaf ears for me.
I do want to quickly pop up before we get talking about redraft. You mentioned Dynasty, and recently Club Fantasy has partnered with Dynasty Nerds. And so I want to make sure we get that ticker up on the screen. Dynasty Nerds has all the tools to help you be the best manager in your own Dynasty league. Their core mission is just to grow the game of Dynasty, and they've actually been around longer than any other Dynasty-focused brand. You're going to get access to the Nerd Film Room if you sign up with them. This gives you all 22 film on all of the incoming rookies, plus a trade calculator, and they even set up mock drafts, which is obviously the core of this show. If you go to dynastynerds.com or download the mobile app and use promo code ClubFantasy, you will receive 15% off of your subscription. So go check it out. If you want to build an actual dynasty, Dynasty Nerds is there to help, and you can use promo code ClubFantasy to save 15%. We have that ticker going at the bottom of the screen. And Josh, I find it interesting that you brought up that waivers levels the playing field. One of the things I feel like waivers does a little differently, FAAB levels the playing field. One of the things I feel like it does a little differently, screw you, Faith. I saw this comment. Yes, he'll be here soon. Ryan's an idiot.
18 more minutes.
Yeah, Ryan's an idiot is the moral of that story. But the long and short is one of the things I miss from leagues where you don't have FAAB is the strategic use of your top waiver priority, like getting to that first waiver priority and holding it until the perfect time. But then you'll have people who hold it all season long and never actually use it. It's just funny to me that it's this layer of competition within competition that kind of goes away with FAAB. But my favorite thing, and Josh, you and I always seem to be on the opposite ends of this with FAAB, is when one of us overbids on a player and you see, $66 for Trey Sermon from the Colts, and then the next bid is $13 and you just get to mercilessly make fun of that person for paying $53 that they didn't need to pay for that player. So there's a give and a take when it comes to FAAB versus waiver priority. But I thought FAAB had kind of just taken over the world, and credit to my former employers, the fantasy footballers. They were one of the hardest ones. They were honestly my introduction to FAAB to begin with. So.
Yeah, I was going to say Dynasty really was my introduction. I mean, I've seen it played or I've seen it used in some leagues previously, but it really never became like a staple in how I do things until I really dove into Dynasty. And again, it's just a matter of it's the strategy, right? And that's really what Dynasty is. Dynasty is all about strategy. So you add that FAAB component to it, I think it just enhances the value of the league at that point.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And you mentioned the old guard. I've been playing fantasy football since the early 2000s, and I had no idea what FAAB was until 2014 when the ballers are like, this is the superior way of doing things. And I have my home league that I've been in since 2007, 2006. They refused for years to go to FAAB. This will be our first year going to FAAB. In our 19th season. It was just not something they were interested in doing. Josh, I know you're on the clock right here. So actually the next thing I want to talk about a little bit is you kind of have it as your under title right now. And that is Superflex and Redraft. And that is something I wanted to ask you about was Superflex has taken over Dynasty, but it has not taken over Redraft. In fact, I would venture to guess off the top of my head, I only play in 2 Superflex redraft leagues, and they're both charity tournaments. And why do you think it's so much more popular in Dynasty than it is redraft? Why have people not really latched onto it in redraft?
Goes back to the FAAB debate. People are so averse to change. Like they like what they like, and they're not really willing to dip their toes outside of that water. I mean, I look at like my history with like home leagues and playing fantasy football. And for the longest time, it was always, do we want to do this? We see people talking about this. Maybe we could try this. And there was always like 2 or 3 people that were just like, no, it is staying the same. We're not touching it. And I'm like, all right, well, this is kind of boring. So like, and that's really, to me, how Club Fantasy was born, because when I had, my buddy Cole, who I started Club Fantasy with, this was a way for us to be able to talk about and explore different aspects of fantasy football, because most people in our leagues didn't want to. Like, it was like pulling teeth just to try to introduce keepers into our home league, right? It was like pulling teeth for the first couple of years when we tried to introduce IDP before everybody was like, no, we're not doing this anymore. It's not happening. So like for me, it was always, if anybody wanted to try something different, you literally had to join another league. That was the only way that you could enjoy and experiment with different formats. And for the average person, anything more than one league was like, oh, it's too much work. I can't do it. Step back. Nope, not it. Can't do it. So I think that in and of itself is a lot of the reason why Superflex really hasn't taken over redraft the way that it has Superflex or Dynasty.
And Charlene chimes in that she is in 3 Superflex redraft leagues and is trying to get all of her leagues to convert. I was going to say, a lot of times, Charlene and anybody else out there who's looking for change, if you want change in your leagues, you have to be the ambassador of that change, because
100%.
They're never going to want to try it unless they're talked into it. And sometimes you need to come with facts. Go find an article that explains your process. If they don't understand why this is going to be more fun, they're going to be resistant to change. So Charlene, keep being the ambassador for Superflex and redraft. And it's funny, like, Josh, you guys, I'm still in a non-PPR league, and you and Joe give me such shit about it. And that also happens to be the only.
I don't even know why Joe's giving you so much shit. This season still drafts 4 running backs in the first 4 rounds, which is about as archaic as non-PPR scoring anyway. So,
but when it comes to that, Josh, that actually perfectly led into my next question. And that is, what are some of the rules you've seen implemented in redraft leagues that you're in that people might want to consider for their redraft leagues?
I think the tight end premium is a very interesting aspect. Side little tangent. So I was talking with Gator J the other night, and because we were talking about his mock draft from Monday night. And I was like, dude, you completely messed with my SEO for your redraft mock draft on Monday. He's like, how? I'm like, there's never in the history of time that's ever been a redraft league that does tight end premium. He's like, wait, that's not a regular thing. I'm like, get your head out of your dynasty ass. Like, this is like, redraft leagues are so basic and vanilla. No. And so I think tight end premium would be a really fun one to try to introduce. I mean, I think it took a very long time to get PPR implemented into, your standard scoring redraft leagues. Like, and I think half PPR has kind of become more of the quote standard just from a balancing act. But like, a tight end premium, I think, would be fun. I'm fine leaving Superflex off, but I'm not opposed if somebody wants to try that. I think the points per carry, I think for running backs could be a fun one. Like, especially if you're trying to implement PPR, maybe try to balance the running back scoring a little bit with the points per carry, especially because there are so many split backfields now. Like, you have a kind of a small handful of running backs that even top 200 carries now, or even smaller that are 250. Yeah. So implementing that, even if it's like 0.25 points per carry, I think would be a fun way to try to even the scoring, especially for, everybody's talking about, oh, we can't do wide receivers early. Can't do wide receivers early. No, not it. We got to get our running backs up. Well, that's the way you get your running backs up. So,
yeah. It's you kind of went where I was going to go with this, as notoriously the oldest living human being playing fantasy football is how I feel sometimes. I've been playing for quite a long time, and PPR was introduced, Josh, to make wide receivers more valuable because running backs were all that mattered in fantasy 25 years ago. And now we've reached a point where wide receivers are all that matters in real football, and we have to find a way to make these running backs more valuable in fantasy football, which was then the bump down to half PPR. And now, as you've pointed out, points per carry, Scott Fishbowl is giving 1/4 of a point per running back carry. And what's funny is it helps running backs, but man, does it help rushing quarterbacks far more.
100%.
Now with a league
almost to a point where it's getting exhausting because you only have, I think, 5 quarterbacks that even top 500 rushing yards.
Yeah.
But it's like automatically, like, if no matter what that quarterback offers from a passing perspective, if they can rush for over 500 yards, oh, that's my QB4. Yeah. It's like, dude, pay attention to everything else outside of the rushing because it doesn't always inflate them that way.
For the 800th time, Josh referencing my hatred of Anthony Richardson. Because that is exactly who you were talking about with that comment, whether you realized it.
No.
I would say whether you realized it or not, my ears started burning because that's just how it goes with me and Anthony Richardson right now. So a couple of the league things that I enjoy that I've had the pleasure of playing in hundreds of leagues at this point, and I've seen some interesting ones. Josh, I've actually played in a redraft that did have, I think it was a half point per carry. So running backs were just filthy there. And one of the things I always tell people is know your league rules when you get into these things, because that league had a flex spot that anybody who started any position not running back in that flex spot, certainly I looked down upon, because when you're giving points with a carry, running backs are just dominating the scoring in that league. But I know your scoring is very important. Josh, obviously, Joe and I, big proponents of IDP. So I would encourage people. I'm not a team defense hater. I used to write the team defense article for the fantasy footballers. I still write the team defense draft tiers for football guys. I love team defense, but adding an IDP, even if you just start with an IDP flex, I think is fun. It gets people more engaged. It teaches them about different ways of doing football. The other thing I encourage is figure out ways to make team defense scoring more valuable, make turnovers and sacks worth a lot more points. If your quarterback is scoring 20 and that's a 1Z position, why not make sure your team defenses can score 20 and 25 points as well? It's just a one-off position, and it makes this thing that everybody looks as an afterthought much more valuable. And I see waiver priority and FAAB blown on team defenses who have the best matchup when you make team defenses more valuable. And I just recently joined a league I wanted to tell everybody about that I found very interesting, which is a divisional league where we drafted the 8 divisions of the NFL. It's not necessarily best ball, but look at it this more as a best ball because there's not going to probably be trades and there's really no free agency. I ended up with the NFC South And that is my team for the whole year. I get to build my starting lineup, a normal 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 2 tight end, 1 tight end, 2 flex. But I get to use the NFC South to build that lineup. So every week I'll be choosing between Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins, does Derek Carr have a good matchup? I have, Rashad White and Bijan Robinson, but then I get to look at Alvin Kamara, and the wide receivers were a big reason why I took them with, Chris Olave, Drake London, Mike Evans, who I'm a big fan of. But that is my entire team. And so just finding these interesting draft formats, it's an 8-person league, but it's not your typical 8-person league. It's just the divisions. And Josh almost had to fire me because to claim our divisions, we just drafted 1 player from that division, and everybody else is taking, Christian McCaffrey, who's the thumbnail of this show, and Patrick Mahomes. And I took A.T. Perry, my guy from the New Orleans Saints, to claim the AFC or NFC South rather. So A.T. Perry gets a huge bump in ADP on Sleeper because of me, Josh, taking him at the 107.
I was going to say, I mean, because you're basically picking a division, like nobody else is getting any of those picks. So it really doesn't matter who specifically you take from that division, but still a bold strategy. Not going to lie.
Hutch should be jumping in here in the next 5 minutes, guys. If you've never watched our show, the draft goes on in the background. We start talking about the interesting picks right about now. Before we do that, let's go ahead and get into a quick draft recap. And so looking over the first 3 rounds, this is the only time I'm going to really be recapping the entire draft. Keeping in mind, this is a super flex. So you're going to notice quarterbacks coming off the board much earlier. The draft starts. Josh, you predicted it with the thumbnail. Christian McCaffrey, the first player off the board at the 101. Let's talk more about that in a second. Josh, you take Jalen Hurts at 2, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Anthony Richardson, Lamar Jackson, CJ Stroud round out the next 5 picks. CeeDee Lamb at 8, Tyreek Hill, the wide receivers start taking over. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, and Jamar Chase rounds out round 1 at 12. And then Duarte takes Bijan Robinson to kind of get one of each, as does Brocal taking Breece Hall. We go back to the quarterbacks, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, but then Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, A.J. Brown, Travis Kelce at the 8th pick of the 2nd round, Dak Prescott falls to 9, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley at 11 to Josh, and then Josh with the Philadelphia stack there, Jordan Love at 12, Jonathan Taylor, Josh takes Caleb Williams at the 2nd pick of the 3rd round, another rookie, Marvin Harrison at 3rd, Travis Etienne, Samuel Porta going to the same team that took Travis Kelce, Kyron Williams, Devontae Adams, Brock Purdy, Chris Olave, Drake London, Mark Andrews, and Justin Herbert round out the first 3 rounds. Josh, I'm going to start with not as many quarterbacks as I thought there were going to be, but let's just start at the very top. Is the downfall of Christian McCaffrey even on anybody's radar? Should he be the first pick in a super flex draft?
I wouldn't go that far, but he should definitely be the first non-quarterback taken. I think that when you look at the high end of quarterbacks, you look at your Josh Allens, your Jalen Hurts. I think you can even put Mahomes and Lamar Jackson in that category, but to me, Hurts and Allen kind of stand on their own. Those two, with what they're able to do on the ground, to supplement their already boisterous like passing yards. To me, it's no question. But I mean, being able to get Jordan Love at the back of the 2nd, I think it's fine. Like, Jordan Love is a very good quarterback. He was a top 5 quarterback last year. So being able to get him at pick 24 in a super flex, I think is fantastic. But you're taking McCaffrey at 101, not knowing who's going to make it back to you at pick 24. So again, personally, I would have gone with Hurts or Allen. And honestly, I had my mind made up that I was going to take Hurts. So when he ended up taking McCaffrey, I was like, oh, do I pivot? Do I go? And I'm like, nope, stick to my guns. Hurts was my guy. I'm going to take Hurts. So, but to me, like, Allen and Hurts are the 101, 102 in Superflex.
So if this were Scott Fishbowl and there was the extra 0.25 per carry, while that still also benefits Hurts and Allen, does that change anything for you with McCaffrey, or does that still keep it where it needs to be?
Oh, no, it honestly, it makes Hurts and Allen even more valuable than Christian McCaffrey.
Perfect. And perfect timing for Hutch here. Let's hope his audio is ready to go. He's not even looking at the camera yet, but I'm bringing him up here. Hutchinson Brown, my friend, apologies. As soon as you said, didn't you tell me we would switch to 11:30? I was like, I sure did. I'm an idiot.
No, you're good, man. Don't worry about it. We're good.
Hutch,
we're
I'm
good.
going to go with you with the same question because I think it's probably the most important thing we've talked about so far. Superflex draft, not necessarily Scott Fishbowl. Should Christian McCaffrey be taken over any of these quarterbacks?
Oh man, that's a really difficult decision because honestly, I gotta be honest, when you talk about who's the most advantageous player in fantasy football, you'd probably say Christian McCaffrey. He is the running back one, the only guy that you can put in that rank, and it's just clear and above. He's the quarterback one. And this year, I mean, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes are all great, but you could argue any of those guys for quarterback one. You could argue Lamar Jackson or Anthony Richardson. I've even seen argued for quarterback one this year. McCaffrey gives you that pure advantage. So personally, well, I would probably lean towards the quarterback still because that position is just so important in a Superflex league and it goes fast. If you lose out, you're in trouble. I don't hate it at all. Christian McCaffrey, I would definitely rank him inside the top 5 for a Superflex.
There we go. And Faith and Charlene both welcoming you to the show. They already yelled at me for promising you earlier in the show, and I had to own up to my mistakes there. Hutch, so one of the things we talked about earlier in the show was you don't see a lot of Superflex in redraft. And part of the reason I wanted to do this is I wanted to see where the older quarterbacks fell. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show. But I was a little surprised, only 6 quarterbacks in the first round. So CMC and 5 wide receivers before we start seeing the next set of quarterbacks go. Considering it's not dynasty, that's a little weird to me because you're just trying to win this year. And I feel like you're going to need a quarterback to win this year.
Yeah, totally. I mean, honestly, if I were looking at the first round, these are the players I'd probably put in there, maybe a little bit of a different order, but I think 6 quarterbacks is honestly totally fair. When it comes to Superflex, I'm not a ridiculously quarterback heavy person. Like, I'll take it if it's there. I like to have the quarterbacks, but I'm willing to wait if there's elite value at wide receivers and running backs instead. Like after I saw 6 quarterbacks go in those first 7 picks, I was like, oh man, Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, or Jamar Chase. I can't wait. I'm excited for it. Like I'm just not gonna reach on a mid quarterback or like a whatever quarterback just so I can have him in a super flex. That's kind of my personal strategy though. Because
I kind of said this. Go ahead, Hutch.
Oh, sorry. Because when there's elite value at running back and wide receiver, it's just for me, it's too hard to pass on.
Well, yeah, and best player available is never a bad draft strategy. Josh, you kind of touched on this when you talked about Gator Raiders taking Christian McCaffrey, and then you were, I can't remember exactly how you put it, but you're like, getting Jordan Love is okay. And so I feel like you probably feel the same way as Hutch there, but I don't want to talk so much about Jordan Love because I know he's polarizing. What does Dak Prescott need to get to do to be represented as an elite fantasy quarterback? He was the QB2 in 6-point touchdowns last year. And if you look at his per game numbers since 2019, my man is elite, Josh. He is elite. And yet he is falling to the end of the second round in a super flex draft.
This is a situation where real life football is clouding our fantasy judgment. So when you ask, what does he need to do in fantasy? He doesn't need to do anything in fantasy. He needs to win a playoff game. He needs to take the Cowboys to a Super Bowl. That's what he needs to do, straight up. And I'm not even kidding about that. Like, I know that sounds dumb to say when we're talking about fantasy football, but how many times have we hyped up people in fantasy football because they're actually good NFL players, even if they're not necessarily great fantasy football assets? And I think a prime example of that is Dallas Goedert. We've been talking about Dallas Goedert as a top, 5, 6, 7, 8 tight end for a while now. How many times has he actually finished there in fantasy? He hasn't, right? It's the same exact situation. If Dak Prescott goes out and throws for 5,000 yards and finishes as the QB1, but Dallas gets bounced in the first round of the playoffs, he's going to be the QB. He's going to be the QB8 off the board in fantasy, even though he just threw for 5,000 yards.
I was literally, so Faith just said, did an Eagles fan just say that the Cowboys need to win the Super Bowl or go to the Super Bowl? It occurred to me as I was saying my question that I'm going to ask 2 Philadelphia Eagles fans what Dak Prescott needs to do to get more respect.
You're asking a tough crowd here with Philly fans. That's hilarious. Oh my goodness.
And obviously Dak Prescott's front of mind for me. I just recently turned in an article for FootballGuys where I was looking at his per game numbers, and essentially since 2019, he missed a lot of the 2020 season and a little bit of the 2022 season. He is averaging 286 yards and 2 touchdowns per game in a 67 game span. Even with missing 17 games, he has the 6th most yards and the 5th most touchdowns in the NFL over that span, missing 17
That is
games.
ludicrous. That is absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah, so like I said, Dak
I
Prescott
mean, he was
is
the
an interesting
QB2 in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues last year. He was
Exactly.
QB3 in normal quarterback scoring. Like he's done everything you want to do. Now, I will say that for as much as he used to run in the early part of his career, since he suffered that ankle injury, his rushing statistics have definitely fallen by the wayside. So I think that also kind of contributes to the fantasy crowd sort of like pushing him on the back burner a little bit. But for as often as we hype up guys like Patrick Mahomes and Joey Burrow and Justin Herbert and now CJ Stroud, guys that can run but don't offer a ton when it comes to, rushing yards and rushing production from a fantasy standpoint, Dak Prescott consistently gets pushed to the side. And you could argue that the last couple of years, he's been more productive with his arm than any of those guys.
Yeah, that's how I feel. He's a guy
Totally.
who, if he continues to fall in fantasy drafts, I'm going to be a very happy camper. I do want to get Calvin's comment up here on the screen. If you take CMC and you're comfortable calling him your super flex, so knowing you need to get another quarterback and for your starting quarterback and then look at CSC as your super flex, I feel like it does balance out to some of these quarterbacks you see, but then you also have to like fill your running back spots and everything from that point forward. Speaking of running backs, Hutch, these guys went 2 picks before you in a super flex, and I feel like you would have went quarterback either way, but I want to know where you guys stand right now. Christian McCaffrey is looked at as the king of running backs, but Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson are both considered by different people to be the next in line. Hutch, where do you stand on the Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson debate? But more importantly, would you have taken either one of them over Kyler Murray if they had fallen to you?
Well, this is a really intriguing conversation between Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson. I mean, both have obviously a lot to going for them this year. Breece Hall, second year removed from the ACL. Aaron Rodgers coming back. He's an elite pass-catching weapon. And Bijan in this offense with Kirk Cousins now. And the Kareem Moore seems to just love him. I mean, the first thing he said in the press conference was, what do you love about this offense? Drake London and Bijan Robinson. Like, it's very simple. And now we've heard Bijan saying he's going to be used in a CMC-like role, like see how he was in San Francisco. That would be absolutely ludicrous for him. It's a really hard debate. Both are going to be elite for fantasy this year. They're my number 2 and 3 running back, even though I love Jahmyr Gibbs. I would put Breece Hall slightly ahead, though. Because the thing is, he showed so much in the passing game last year that I'm so excited to see what he does with a nearly 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles tear. I think we're looking at a massive pass-catching workload here for Breece Hall, and I think it's going to be significantly greater than Bijan. So I will take Breece Hall. I think he might.
Why would you say significantly greater? When
or not significantly, like
Bijan had 86 targets last year too.
Yeah, Bijan's gonna be.
We're not talking about a guy that only had 50 targets, and then we're just trying to project up.
Significant's a wrong word, but I think Breece Hall's gonna out target him this year. That's what I would look at for this season.
I say, Josh, you seem to disagree. Go at it, buddy.
I've been pretty adamant that I think if there's anybody that can dethrone Christian McCaffrey as the RB1, it is Bijan Robinson. That's where I sit. I think from a skill perspective, I think Bijan is still head and shoulders above Breece Hall, in my opinion. I like Breece Hall. I have both of them in quite a few dynasty leagues. I have one dynasty league where I have literally both of those guys on the team, which allowed me to make the move to trade Garrett Wilson. If you want to argue the pecking order of targets, then yes, I think Breece Hall fits that mold because Bijan still has Kyle Pitts in that conversation in Atlanta. Drake London while he's seen an elite target share, has never actually commanded elite targets the way that Garrett Wilson has. And I think that can also benefit Bijan Robinson in a pass-catching type of role. But I mean, when you still look at the production aspect, I think touchdowns will stick to Bijan more than they'll stick to Breece Hall. And that is also going to
the touchdown game
lift up the fantasy value of Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, the touchdown debate's a really good one because Breece Hall, when you compare them with the offenses, you probably lean with Atlanta.
And that's kind of what I was going to say is my distrust of Aaron Rodgers should, I guess, prop up Breece Hall, and they're so close for me. But I'm a Bijan Robinson guy myself. So, but I'm just worried that if Aaron Rodgers isn't right, and who's there now? Tyrod Taylor came over from the other New York team. So yeah, you have Tyrod Taylor as the backup. I just don't know how well that offense is going to function.
Oh, Hudson.
Yeah, probably. What's that?
I was just telling you Joshua because he got sniped. I think he got sniped for Deontay Johnson right there at the pick before him.
That would be correct, Hutch.
Yeah, no, yeah. I saw that. I saw him. Yeah. I was tempted to take him in my pick just to mess with you, but I really wanted Montgomery. So, but when I saw him go right there at the 1, it was like, oof, I know Josh is hurting now.
I was going to go to tight ends next, but I actually want to bounce to the chat because Retro Coach said something interesting, and Josh kind of debated him in the chat already. He says Dak has 1 target, and obviously they're talking CeeDee Lamb, but it's the second part of that sentence that I want to talk about. Tony Pollard's loss will be felt. Hutch, Tony Pollard was not very good last year. Now,
he was not effective.
He was certainly not effective in the red zone. But my question to you is the mid performance we got from Tony Pollard last year going to be impossible for the corpse of Ezekiel Elliott to replicate?
I'm going to be honest. I agree with the statement that his presence will be missed because honestly, the running back room this year is so disastrous. I mean, Pollard wasn't great last year. I mean, he was injured part of the season. He wasn't fully healthy a lot of the season. Down the stretch, he actually looked pretty good that he was, getting off the ankle injury, getting fully healthy. But this running back room is absolutely disastrous. Ezekiel Elliott is completely toast. He was toast in New England. He's even more toast now. I mean, you're turning that toaster all the way up to 10 plus of the setting. He is burnt. And then you're looking at Rico Dowdle, who he's fine. He's fine. Deuce Vaughn, fine. These are just guys. This is not going to be a great running back room. I agree that Tony Pollard's presence will be missed. Even though he was not effective last year, he was better than any of these options that they have now.
So Pollard only had 2 more targets last year than Ezekiel Elliott did.
That's insane.
I'm just throwing that out there.
We
can sit here and talk about how toast Ezekiel Elliott is. He's still a good pass catcher, and he's still one of the better pass blockers when you're talking about
he played
in the
center the last time we saw him play for the Dallas Cowboys.
That was so bad.
Yeah. I don't really have anything to add on to that comment, but I mean, in the passing game, Zeke and Pollard to me are interchangeable just in what they were being used as. Pollard in the passing game with Zeke was used very differently, but Pollard without Zeke was used the same way that they're planning to use Zeke this year. So it's going to be a wash in my opinion. Now, obviously there's more juice with Pollard than with Zeke, but they're not being used on flat routes to get 10 yards. They're being used in break glass in case of emergency situations. This offense, the 1-2 tandem is Lamb and Ferguson with Brandon Cooks to stretch the field. And, maybe we actually start to see some Jalen Tolbert targets, right? But that's the way this offense is built. You even go back to the Green Bay days when Mike McCarthy was last calling plays there. Who was dominating targets? It was Devontae Adams and everybody else. And it didn't matter, right? Give CeeDee Lamb 190 targets, this offense, and everybody involved in it is going to be just fine.
Guys, I was going to ask more questions about this, but I can't have 2 Eagles fans on the show and then spend the entire show talking about the Dallas Cowboys. So, Hutch, I know you wrote an article about him. I don't think it's actually come out yet. Josh takes Saquon Barkley to end the second round as the 5th running back off the board. It's been a while since we've talked about Saquon as a top 5 running back. Hutch, is this stint in Philadelphia going to be the reemergence of Saquon Barkley?
I think totally, honestly. I really, really do believe in Saquon Barkley. Last year, when looking at him play, when he was fully healthy, obviously the Giants offense wasn't helping him out, but he still looked good. He still looked like Saquon Barkley to me when I was watching him play. And Saquon this past couple of years in the Giants offense, it's just been so disastrously bad. I mean, they've been bottom 6 in terms of offensive line, in terms of run blocking. The quarterback play has been terrible. They've had I don't think they've had a 1,000-yard receiver since OBJ, if I'm not mistaken. It's been it's been disastrous for the Giants offense since Saquon has been there. And now he's on the Philadelphia Eagles, who have a couple running backs in the backfield that can, give him some rest. They have Jalen Hurts, who can also run the football. So Saquon is probably be worked in, worked out, make sure he's fresh-legged, ready to go. I mean, he's going to get a big-time role. Don't get me wrong, but he's definitely going to be rested, be good to go. You have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, you have Dallas Goedert, and you have Jalen Hurts, who we know can throw the football pretty well. This is an offense that's going to command so much attention from defenses in the receiving game that Saquon's just going to come out of nowhere and just punch you in the throat. I mean, it's going to be so deadly. And I think Saquon Barkley is going to have a very effective, very efficient year in Philadelphia behind that great offensive line. And as a result, I think he'll be a top 5 running back in fantasy.
Josh, I'm going to give you time to talk about it later because you're going to talk about your draft. But Hutch, I'm going to put you on the spot about Josh's team build here. How do you feel about a team with Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley? Is that a draft strategy, taking the quarterback and running back from a team that you would consider in a redraft league?
I would love to, trash Josh's team for a second, but I got to make my pick real quick, so I don't run out of time. I'm going to make a pick.
Bring it, Hutch. Bring it.
Yeah, I'll be right back. I'll be right back to do that. I'm going to reach down the board a little bit here, and I'm actually going with a rookie running back. I feel it's really exciting. I'm actually going with Trey Benson.
Oh, I like it.
I'm gonna reach a little bit. I know I'm reaching down the board a little bit, but
hey, you get to talk about that when we talk about your team right now. Get into Josh's team, the top quarterback and the top running back.
Josh's team. Let's get into Josh's team. I'm trying to. I can't read it on the computer, unfortunately, so I'm trying to pull it up on my phone here.
Oh, you don't need to have this whole team. I really just want to know if it's a decent strategy to take a team's quarterback and running back as your first 2 picks.
Well, the thing is, it's difficult because in this situation, I think that's fine because Saquon is a really good pass-catching running back, and you get those targets together, right? And if Saquon catches a few touchdowns, you got that. You got the receiving game. So if you're looking at a running back quarterback situation where the running back is a really good pass catcher, like stacking Aaron Rodgers with Breece Hall or Kirk Cousins and Bijan Robinson, like you're going to be just fine there because those running backs are catching plenty of passes, and that's going to be really fun. And if the offense is having a great day, both those guys are likely going to have a good day. So you're going to look pretty good there. But if the
Eagles offense is having a good day, Josh is having a good day, regardless.
Yeah, Josh's having a good day. There you go. Exactly. And so am I. We're both Philly fans, man. But but if you were to stack, like, I'm trying to think here. I'm looking at like Jaden Daniels and Brian Robinson, who isn't necessarily pass catcher. I don't think that's the ideal stack that you're looking for. You don't want to
make sure it's a guy who catches passes.
You want to get somebody who catches some passes. Yes. It doesn't have to be elite. You don't have to be top 5 in receiving, but you got to catch a few passes because that stack is just not as valuable then.
Well, to be fair, by landing Hurts and Barkley, Josh probably just landed every Philadelphia Eagles touchdown this entire season. I don't know that other than
he got a lot of Eagles touchdowns this year.
That's going to be all of them.
Oh yeah,
guys, I want to take a look at Hoof's team because Hoof is feeling his team.
Yeah, he's bragging.
Yeah, so Hoof said if he could build every roster the way he built this one, he would. And what I found interesting, I had actually already taken a note on Hoof's team, and what I really wanted to talk about was the tight end drafting. So Hoof probably went into this thinking Scott Fishbowl, which is absolutely fine. Treat your mock drafts how you want to treat your mock drafts. But I'm going to go ahead and highlight Hoof's team here. Starts off with Anthony Richardson. Back ends it with Jaden Daniels 2 picks later, but goes Travis Kelce and Sam Laporta in the middle. Josh, this is not inherently a tight end premium draft. And some of the things I've picked up on this show over the last few weeks is tight ends are plummeting. And we kind of see it in this draft. Hoof takes the first 2 tight ends, and then we don't see Mark Andrews go till 311, Trey McBride at 4-3, Kincaid at the end of the 4th, and then it's just like 1 tight end per round. If you love tight ends like clearly Hoof does, or like our good friend Kelly Singh does, is reaching this early on a tight end and a non-tight end premium, is that just a deadly mistake, Josh, or does it not matter if you like your team when it's all said and done?
I don't think it really matters. I mean, the way that these guys are producing, one of them is going to be a valuable flex play anyway. I mean, granted, I'm not trying to draft a flex player in the 3rd round, but look, it's not how I would build my team unless it's tight end premium. That I'm just going to throw that out there. And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with how this draft has turned out for him. He got a solid wide receiver 1 in Cooper Kupp. We know what his upside is. But the big thing for me was Sam Laporta, and I think this is really what keeps getting missed. Touchdown regression is a real thing.
Yeah.
And if he only scores 6 touchdowns this year, he's not approaching the tight end 1 that he was at last year. So that
Thank you,
is kind of where I'm at with Sam Laporta and the hype that has come with him. I would much rather just take the consistency with a guy like a Travis Kelce or a Mark Andrews, and I personally would throw Trey McBride into that with what he did and where he finished without scoring touchdowns. That's who I want.
Hutch, I was going to try to word this question differently to you and ask, do you have a problem with Kelce going before Laporta? But you had a strong reaction to Josh saying touchdown regression is coming.
I love what Josh is saying because I've been trying to put this out a lot of the offseason. Now I don't love Sam Laporta for this season. I mean, I'm actually surprised seeing Kelce go ahead of him because usually it's Laporta as the clear-cut tight end one. Sometimes Kelce floats in his range, but usually it's like Laporta and then like another round until another tight end. And I think that's absolutely insane. I love what Josh is saying about the touchdown regression. It is totally there. And also with Jahmyr Gibbs getting a lot of hype, getting more versatile in the passing game, Jameson Williams with his potential, there could be added target competition here for Detroit this year for Sam Laporta, and that just limits his fantasy value and his fantasy upside. I don't have a problem with Kelce going before Laporta. I mean, obviously, Kelce is up there in age, but the Chiefs showed a lot of confidence in him, giving him a massive contract extension for the next couple of years. It shows that the team that thinks he's really good and thinks he's really important to their team and thinks he's going to be good for the next couple of seasons. And that, as a result, I'm going to follow that money, and I'm going to be fine with Travis Kelce over Sam Laporta. I would also like Josh was saying, we talk about Mark Andrews and Trey McBride. Personally, I'm a huge Trey McBride guy. I love Mark Andrews as well. I would also be taking those players over Sam Laporta.
So that's what I was going to ask, Hutch, is Kelce still your tight end one then? Because I know it's been very kind of like niche to say he's not the tight end one anymore, but clearly you're not bought in on Laporta. Would you take guys like Andrews, maybe Trey McBride overhead of both of them? I'm
going to be honest. This might be hot. Trey McBride's my tight end one.
Okay.
Spicy. I like it.
I will take Trey McBride over any tight end in fantasy. I mean, that's my guy. I mean, I'm looking at him in the 4th round. It's so easy for me every time. Oh, I'm on the clock. I got to do something here.
I'll say Hutch is going to make his picks, and I'm going to remind everybody, first and foremost, if you're watching us anywhere, thank you. But if you're not watching us on YouTube, Josh is always kind enough to include the link to watch us wherever you are. If you could pop over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so yet. We just recently crossed 1,000 followers. We're working our way towards 2,000, and you can help with that for absolutely free. We go live like 6 times a week. We are here to help you win fantasy leagues. Just hit the damn subscribe button. Also, if you're looking to support the show in another way, quick reminder, we have partnered with Dynasty Nerds, and you can get 15% off of your subscription if you use promo code Club Fantasy. Hutch, I scrolled the draft board a little bit, and we're getting close to the time where I'm going to have you guys recap your teams. Hutch, I know you only got to do half a show with us, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But the last thing I wanted to end this show was the reason we are doing this show. And that is because last week I got asked a question about late quarterback value in a Superflex. And I forgot to get to it last week, and we were still talking Dynasty. I want to get into redraft because what I expected to see happen in this draft kind of happened. I wanted to see where these older quarterbacks were going to fall. And so you see in this draft, Kirk Cousins, who still has a little bit of dynasty value, goes all the way up in the 4th round to Faith. And then Aaron Rodgers and Matt Stafford, who were sometimes even in a super flex falling into the double digits, go in the 6th round, both in this draft. My question to you is, Hutch, when you look at the second half of this draft, or whatever you can see from what you're looking at right now, what quarterback value stands out to you here? We're seeing young guys and old guys in this redraft format. Aaron Rodgers in the 6th, just a round ahead of when JJ McCarthy, the new hotness, goes, who is tied to Justin Jefferson. Where do you lean? Would you be taking the older established players or the younger quarterbacks? Where do you see the value at the end of this draft?
So I'm going to be honest. I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I really like where I got Russell Wilson. Honestly, I really do. Obviously, his job could be in jeopardy if Justin Fields outplays him in camp, or if he's struggling. If Russell Wilson is struggling early in the season, they could go to Fields. They have the opportunity to do so if the Steelers, they really wanted to. However, Russell Wilson last year, he wasn't great for NFL purposes for fantasy. He was a borderline top 15 quarterback in plenty of weeks. He gave you some QB1 weeks. He gave you some production plenty of times. And now we're looking at this offense where you have Roman Wilson, you have George Pickens, you have Pat Freiermuth, you have 2 good running backs, and you have a better offensive line than it has been in years past. They definitely added some pieces this offseason, all younger pieces, a lot of younger guys that still have some things to prove, but still, they're at least trying to make improvements. And that's really going to help out Russell Wilson, who I think could be really solid for fantasy this year, like a top 15-ish quarterback. So if you're looking for a sleeper QB, like a late QB2, or as I got him as my QB3, I think that's a really, really solid option, at least for the first half of the season, if not the whole season, depending on how he plays.
And Josh, basically that same question earlier in the chat, Retro Coach pointed out that it doesn't even feel like a super flex because of how long people were waiting to take their second QB. I just kind of went and glanced. Most people had their second QB by the 6th round, 7th round, somewhere in there. Will Levis was the last second QB added. So I want to keep with that same theme with you. Where are you seeing the value late right now? Bryce Young just recently went off the board. He was the first damn pick of the draft last year, and everybody hates this guy.
Yeah, that's why I'm like 10th round for a third quarterback. I'll take that.
I didn't even realize it was you, Josh. I'm looking at the board from another.
Yeah, I mean, I think where the value in Superflex, it's in the sense that the last 2 years we've had over 60 quarterbacks starting in the NFL. And that, to me, is what's driving the price down on those second quarterbacks, because people are like, why am I going to spend the high draft capital on some of these like second, third tier quarterbacks when I know they're just going to get hurt and I'm going to need to replace them anyway, right? Those and the backup options are all sitting on waivers. So then it becomes, all right, this is what I'm saving my FAAB for, or this is what I got to save that waiver priority for. So that, to me, is kind of what's dipping the price on the quarterbacks in Superflex. When you're getting into the value of some of these older guys, it's all situation based. You know, Rodgers coming off an injury, Stafford coming off an injury, Kirk Cousins coming off an injury, Baker Mayfield, quarterback change, Geno Smith struggled last year, Deshaun Watson has been struggling since 2020, Russell Wilson, bench, traded. You know, there's just a lot of uncertainty. So that, to me, is just really what's driving the price down.
Sorry, go Ryan.
No, you go, buddy.
All right, I was going to mention too, you got to consider last year as well. You know, you mentioned 60 different starting quarterbacks over the last 2 seasons. You got to consider last year as well. I mean, there were so many injuries last year. It was ridiculous. I mean, we talked about it all season long. It was like,
well, and even the year before,
dropping
there was like
flies.
64 starting quarterbacks.
But last year, there were 64 different starting quarterbacks at some point. Yeah. It was just absolutely ludicrous. I mean, I think the Browns had 4 different quarterbacks, just on their team alone. It was absolutely insane how many different quarterbacks were starting this year. And I think as a result, it's driving the price of quarterbacks down. I mean, along with everything Josh said, I think the injuries too have really, really hurt quarterback play.
I do want to give credit where it's due.
Quarterback value.
Brocal was actually the last one to take his second quarterback, way in round 9, grabs Geno Smith and then Deshaun Watson a round later. Josh, along that same theory, where there are so many quarterbacks playing, is 3 quarterbacks still a must when it comes to Superflex?
I mean, if it's a 12-team league, for me, 100%. In a 10-team, probably not. But I still want to try to like make sure that I've got value, or at least somebody that I think can put up respectable numbers. I still am very much like, let me chase some upside. That's why I went more Bryce Young versus like a veteran guy like a Derek Carr or Russell Wilson. Because to me, they still offer the same risk in that, you know, there's a lot of unpredictability. But you mentioned it. We're talking about a former number 1 overall pick with somebody like Bryce Young. Let me see the upside and the trajectory of what he could be in year 2. Can he make that leap? He's got new weapons. He's got Deontay. They drafted Xavier Legette. So I would much rather take that upside play there. But yeah, I think there's still value in having that third quarterback. But again, to me, it's very league dependent. Like 10-team, 8-team, I'm not messing with it. But 12-team, I would 1,000% want to get that third guy.
And Hutch, you mentioned Russell Wilson, excellent value as your third quarterback. I'm going to put you on the spot. You don't normally do this in a fantasy draft, but it's a mock draft. Would you consider Justin Fields with one of your last picks here and go with a 4 quarterback build just so you have that QB spot locked down from Pittsburgh?
I think it's totally valid, honestly. You know, Russell Wilson, not only could he get benched, but he could also get injured, and that would present the opportunity for Fields. And we know Fields, the thing is about Fields, he's not a great NFL quarterback. At least that's what he's proven so far in his career. But he's elite for fantasy because that dude can run. That dude can really run. He's one of the better running quarterbacks in the entire National Football League. What's that? Dude, it's Arthur Smith up there, so we don't know what's going to happen. It's Arthur Smith. He could get some goal line carries. I don't know what's going to happen with Justin Fields, man. that would be so shocking this year. And honestly, it would make so much sense given who's the coaching right now. But anyways, if Fields gets starting quarterback reps, he's going to be really good for fantasy. So I definitely consider it if the value is there. Yeah, but I wouldn't like reach for it. I would definitely look for it though if it's there.
Perfect. And that brings me into the surprise keep trade cut question that I ask every week. Austin hates when I spring these on him, but I do one every single week. Hutch, I always let the guest hear it first. So Josh is going to answer first. And Josh, I wanted to look at the older quarterbacks. You guys have both been very complimentary of the older quarterbacks. And I think the three that we could lump together, and Hutch, I almost did Russell Wilson, but I decided not to, is Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, and then I threw Derek Carr in there. Now, Derek Carr is significantly cheaper than
what you should have done was put Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins in that conversation.
I thought Cousins is so heads and tails better when you look at ADP. It wasn't going to happen. I really should have with the torn Achilles, but we're going to keep it as the question I have written, Josh. I want you to keep trade cut Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, and Derek Carr, the older forgotten quarterbacks.
This is pretty easy for me.
I thought
I'm cutting Derek Carr because he's trash. I am keeping Matthew Stafford, and I'm trading Aaron Rodgers because I don't know why Aaron Rodgers has the value name that he has, but Matthew Stafford has better weapons all around. So I'm going to lean into the value that Rodgers' name has and keep who I think is actually the better situational quarterback in Matthew Stafford.
So the point of this question for me while Hutch makes his pick is I didn't mind having Derek Carr in there because he is younger than the other two. And I didn't know if age and less health risks would play into anybody wanting to have Derek Carr on their team. Hutch, Josh was very adamant. He was cutting Derek Carr and keeping and trading the value on the name recognition of Aaron Rodgers. Do you agree or do you have a different answer?
You're muted, Hutch.
Hutch, you might be muted, and also my alarm on my phone is going off that I forgot to turn off, so I'm going to slide and get rid of that while Hutch is answering here. Go ahead, Hutch.
My back?
Yes, you're back.
You're
back. There we go. Okay, I'm back. All right. Before I give my answer, I just wanted to say to Lewis Hall at the 8th pick, you're the worst. I really wanted Jalen Wright. That was really tough. That was really frustrating for me watching.
The tilt is real.
The tilt was real at that point, man. I got a little up in my head. I got really focused in on Jalen Wright. I did not think someone would take him. So that was not nice. And now I'm looking towards your question. I completely agree with Josh.
So I was going to okay.
Yeah, I completely agree with
Josh.
Me to
re-ask.
No, I got it. Yeah, I completely agree with Josh that Derek Carr is the cut 100%. And I agree with him on the rest too. I think that you got to trade Aaron Rodgers off, his name value. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. He's got Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall. People are excited about this offense. The hype from last year is bleeding into this year. And people are forgetting, and I think it's similar with Kirk Cousins too, that these guys are coming off Achilles tears at nearly 40 years old, 30-plus-year-old quarterbacks. Yeah. Like, that's very significant. That's not something we can just brush off and say, like, oh, it doesn't matter. It matters. And I think that could really impact both their plays this year. So looking at Aaron Rodgers, thinking I'm going to trade him away, and Matthew Stafford, who's not coming off a career-ending or season-ending injury, like I'm going to take him. He's got Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, those weapons there. That's just so nice. And you got Kyren Williams and Blake Corum now in the backfield. It's an exciting offense. So as long as Stafford is still competent, he could approach QB1 numbers this year.
Yeah, and Retro Coach is actually, first of all, Retro Coach threw in be polite to the elders. and as the one who gets made fun of for being the old guy, Retro Coach, I completely agree. But Retro Coach actually agrees with your guys' picks as well, saying Carr has the worst weapons of the bunch, really echoing a lot of what you guys are saying. Guys, we're going to run a little bit over on this show because I wanted to make sure I gave everybody time to finish the draft and Hutch time to talk about everything. So while Hutch is getting ready to make his last pick, Josh has completed his team, and we are going to get into the draft recap. So Josh, you have produced this show for long enough that you don't have to talk about every player. You talk about who you want to talk about, who you don't want to talk about.
Yeah, for me, I tend to deploy more of like a hero RB strategy with a lot of my drafts because I like loading up on the wide receivers. So, getting Barkley there and kind of stacking him with Hurts, that like you mentioned early in the show, Ryan, that's going to be anywhere from 90 to 100% of the Eagles' touchdowns this year. And they're going to be a really good offense. So I'm very much happy with that. Because it's super flex, that's where Caleb Williams comes into play, and I love being able to stack him with his wide receiver 1 and DJ Moore. I am very high on DK Metcalf this year. I have him as a top 15 wide receiver in my projections. So nice. Getting a potential wide receiver 1 in fantasy in the 5th round, I think is an absolute steal. We've talked ad nauseum about Christian Kirk and Jaden Reed. I think those guys are screaming values in drafts. And again, getting Jaden Reed, who I have as a top 20 wide receiver in the 8th round, sign me up all day. And then from there, it's taking dart throws on running back. So, I like James Conner. I think he's going to have a lot of value. Same thing with Jonathan Brooks. That's a potential RB1. Tajay Spears, Antonio Gibson, RB2s in their respective offenses. I do regret waiting a little bit on tight end. I was really targeting Evan Ingram, and he went a little earlier than I thought he was going to. And then I had my eyes on Jake Ferguson, and the moment that he went, I was like, well, I guess we're going the Hunter Henry route. And people just kind of kept sleeping on him. So getting him in the 12th was great. And 2 wide receivers I think people are really sleeping on. Obviously, Josh Palmer. Dude, he is the wide receiver 1. You can miss me with the Lad McConkey stuff. And getting that value in the 13th round, whoo! Yeah. And Marvin Mims, Sean Payton literally said he was blocked by Jerry Jeudy. They moved off of Jerry Jeudy. Yeah. That opens up 100 targets in the 15th round. Are you serious? Give me that all day.
I like it. That's Josh's recap. Hutch, I'm going to drop it over to you. And so, right. Hutch, you obviously weren't here for the big part of the first part of the draft, but you mentioned, that Amon-Ra St. Brown value. I wanted to have you talk a little bit about Kyler Murray, who you landed as your first quarterback here. We haven't seen Kyler Murray play a full season in a very long time, but the last time he did play a full season, he was very good. Obviously, you think he could get back to that?
I personally have him ranked as a top 5 quarterback. So yes, I'm very Kyler Murray this year. He's one of my guys this year. I'm very in on him. When I saw him in the 2nd round, it was just too easy to take that pick there in a super flex league. I'm really in on Kyler. Over the last 4 years, he's been a top 8 quarterback in points per game in each of those seasons, 2 of them being in the top 5. Obviously, he's been injured a little bit, but this 2nd year off the ACL is going to be huge for him. We talk about for running backs all the time. Usually the 2nd year off the ACL is better, but for Kyler, a running quarterback, it's really going to be helpful for him 2nd year off that ACL. And now he's got some of the best weapons he's ever had. Marvin Harrison Jr., the 4th overall pick, who I don't know how you guys feel about him. I think he's going to make a big impact as a rookie. The dude is NFL ready. The dude is just so ready to make a huge impact right away. He's in line to be the number 1 wide receiver on the team. And then you got Trey McBride, who actually took in the 4th round, who I think is going to be the tight end 1 in fantasy this year. Very, very excited. I get this Kyler Murray, Trey McBride, or Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr. stack a lot in drafts. I do
want to throw out real quick, Charlene. Charlene says she's been building that Kyler McBride stack as well.
Yeah, I get a lot of Kyler McBride stacks. So that's one of my favorite stacks in fantasy this year. I'm very hyped for both those players. So I'm very excited about the Arizona offense this year with those 2 guys. And then Amon-Ra, Drake London, T. Higgins, some good wide receiver value. I want to specifically shout out Tank Dell, who I think is a top 15 receiver this year in fantasy, the best receiver on the Houston Texans. I know you got Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs there. I think personally, honestly, at this point in their career, you could argue that Tank Dell's a better wide receiver than Stephon Diggs. I'm not going to lie. I really do believe in Tank Dell this year, and I think he's a fantastic wideout coming into his 2nd season. I'm really, really hyped to see what he can do. And I'm looking at him and C.J. Stroud in this offense. I'm really excited. I mean, C.J. Stroud told the Texans to draft this kid. It's clear they have an amazing relationship. Stroud is always talking him up. He's going to get his in this offense. I'm quite excited to see what he'll do for fantasy. And then I got some, I wasn't intending to go this late with running back. I really wasn't, but the wide receiver value just kept falling to me. And then Tua fell to me in the 6th round. I was very excited about that as well. But I end up with Dave Montgomery, Devin Singletary, Trey Benson, Ezekiel Elliott, and Kendra Miller, some guys that I all think have some serious upside. And then I'm looking at Russell Wilson like QB3, and then I think I got auto picked because I was talking, and then I
did with Juwan Johnson. I noticed that.
I got Juwan Johnson with my last pick. I probably, if I was actually paying attention like I should have, I probably would have taken. I might have taken Jermaine Burton, wide receiver, the Cincinnati Bengals rookie wide receiver. I think is intriguing for this year. But
yeah, it's always interesting to see where the rookie wide receivers end up when it comes to fantasy drafts, because
I seem to like a lot of rookies this year. I like in a lot of redraft mocks I do. I didn't get tons in this one, but I've done a lot of redraft mocks, and I continue to get a lot of rookies on my bench, like a lot of rookies. I like these guys late.
So I was looking for an oops of the draft, and honestly, it was a little harder because you guys did a really good job drafting. I was going to give Hoove more shit, but I'm going to go on the assumption that Hoove was looking at this as a Scott Fishbowl mock. So 2 quarterbacks, 2 tight ends to start. I feel like we beat that horse already. I'm going to say a player that I think the value with the people around him doesn't line up with his value, and that is Achane in the 5th round. I feel like this is probably a fair spot for him, but then I look at the people so Isaiah Pacheco was the first running back taken before him. I think I'd rather have Achane in that explosiveness over Pacheco all day. And then you're dealing with like Kyle Pitts, who's a wait and see, Stephon Diggs, who could potentially just not be that great, Evan Ingram, and Tua Tagovailoa. Obviously, it's a super flex, so there's a whole question about quarterbacks falling. But I just feel like Achane, when you look at this, I feel like you guys let him fall too far. So it's a kudos to Lewis Hall, but it's a shame on you to everybody else. I think Achane holds more value than what we're giving him credit for. Guys, that is our show. Hutch, first and foremost, thank you for jumping in, even though I'm an idiot and don't know how to schedule my own show. You are always amazing, and I'm sorry we couldn't get your dad on this show, but hey, there's still plenty of time this summer for me to get you guys on together. Let everybody know all the wonderful places you work for and where they can find your work.
I appreciate y'all for having me on the show. Thanks for tuning in. Y'all can follow me on Twitter. I'm at HutchinsonB_FF. I do work with football guys. I do work with Dynasty League Football, otherwise known as DLF. And check out Hooked on Fantasy. Me and Luke Sawhook's podcast. We run every single week talking fantasy football. And we just did recently a top 12 quarterback rankings for redraft for this season. We went through our top 12 individual rankings. So
yeah, you put a graphic out this morning, right?
I put a little graphic out this morning about it. So check out the Twitter if you want to see those rankings. But yeah, that's it. Thank you guys for having me on again.
No, Hutch, you're the best. Always welcome here at Club Fantasy.
And
Josh,
congrats on graduating, buddy.
Yeah,
thank you.
Point,
yeah,
high
school. Yeah, it's over. It's done.
You're officially old now. Welcome to the real world. It sucks.
I've shared this story before, but there was a week 4 years ago where we had a guest cancel on us. And Hutch had just came onto Twitter. And Hutch, your first post was something like, "My name is Hutchinson Brown. I'm a 14-year-old kid who loves fantasy football, and I'm ready to make I'm ready to break into this industry," sort of thing. And Josh was like, "Do you have any ideas for Wednesday?" I was like, "I'll DM this kid and see if he wants to come on. If you're cool with it." Josh was cool with it. Hutch was cool with it. Hutch's dad, I loved, was kind of there at the beginning of the show, basically to make sure that me and Josh weren't some creeps that were Dateline NBCing his kid to get him onto a podcast here. But Hutch, your growth in the fantasy football is a testament, because I love to tell your story that you just put it out there. This is what my thoughts are. This is, I want to be a part of this industry. And obviously it's such a great industry and we embraced you. So Hutch, love seeing you grow, and the fact that you're now graduating high school is literally bananas to me.
Thank you, dude. Yeah, I remember, man. Like that DM was insane, because that first tweet I sent kind of blew up a little bit.
Yeah,
not ridiculous, but it blew up a little bit. People were liking it. So it was a fun day. And then I don't remember if it was same day or the next day. I saw your DM, and it was just like, I'm going to go on a podcast now. I mean, like I was planning on starting my own show. I hadn't even released a teaser trailer or anything yet. Like the trailer was coming out in March. Like I hadn't even done any of that yet. And I was like, oh shoot, I'm about to go on my first show. I didn't have a studio, dude. Like I literally, hold up. One last thing before we wrap up. One last thing. I know we got to wrap up. Like I didn't even have a studio. Like my first trailer, when I recorded my trailer, I had like this like vlogger mic that I just had in my room somewhere, because I hadn't been able to set up all my stuff yet. And I put 2 chairs up and I put a blanket over it for sound dampening. I crouched up in a corner and I recorded it in there. That was the trailer for my podcast. That's where I recorded it. And then the first episode of my podcast, I eventually got a studio and we got it built out, and it was fun. But it was so funny. So when you DM me for a podcast, I was like, oh man, like I literally sat on my bed when we did our podcast. I sat on my bed, on the side of my bed. That's where I sat. It was. I don't
think I've ever shared this story. My first podcast, Hutch, was with Club Fantasy. Josh invited me to do the show.
Yeah.
It was when I was still writing with the Fantasy Footballers. My first show was in our guest room, sitting on a bed. I didn't have a mic yet, Hutch. I did the show into my phone, and my notes were actually pen and paper on a notebook. I hadn't had all of my stuff ready.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's my story. I still have that notebook.
Pen and paper is, right?
Yeah. Josh, I still have that notebook.
You're speaking a foreign language right now, man. I don't know what you're saying. Like,
all right, Hutch, you're amazing. Josh, let everybody know what Club Fantasy has going on.
Oh my God, so much stuff. Tomorrow morning, Dynasty After Party. We're continuing the a look inside team previews that we've been doing on Wednesdays, no pun intended. Monday night, Mocking with the Stars, Gator J and Chris Battistell. They're actually doing a Scott Fishbowl mock draft with the winner of last year's Scott Fishbowl. That'll be really exciting. Tuesday night, another episode of Masterclass with Gator J. I believe Stacy is still out because she's attending a family wedding up in Nashville. So we'll have a couple of guests for that. Wednesday morning, Golf DFS, Who's Your Caddy with Kelly Singh. Obviously, no pun intended on Wednesday night. We have the great Howard Bender joining Joe and myself because Ryan will be unavailable.
Yep.
And then Thursday night will be the second episode of Mock Girl Summer with Wendy Early. Julia won't be able to join, but we'll get a double dose of Howard Bender because Howard Bender is going to be the guest for that one on Thursday night. They're doing a Battle of the Sexes tournament mock draft. We're hoping actually to get another guest on that one. I've got a couple feelers out to join Howard with Wendy. So should be a lot of fun. A lot of good stuff coming up in the next week and really going forward on Club Fantasy because that's why you need to hit subscribe on our YouTube channel.
I was going to say, Josh already has the perfect summation that I always do a much shorter outro. Basically, we go live 6 times a week for you. We cover everything. Redraft, Dynasty, Best Ball, and then we do mock drafts
Soon
to
to
help
be
you
7.
Soon to be 7. And we do mock drafts to help you get better at all of these things. As Josh mentioned, we even have a golf show. There is no reason for you not to hit that damn subscribe button. Do it. You're going to feel better about it. We're going to feel better about it. It's going to be a great summer as we break down all of these NFL teams and do mock drafts to help you become a better fantasy football manager. Guys, thank you for drafting with us. Thank you for watching the show. Thank you for hitting that subscribe button preemptively. Always remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and practice makes perfect. We will see you at next week's mock.